Picture this. You're standing at your bathroom mirror this morning brushing your teeth, the same ritual you've performed thousands of times, but today something stops you mid-brush. You catch your eye in the reflection, and for just a moment you see yourself as if for the first time. The face looking back has changed since yesterday, since last year, since childhood. Lines have appeared, disappeared, and rearranged themselves. Your body is quietly, constantly dying and being reborn. Millions of cells departing, millions arriving, like an ocean that somehow maintains the illusion of being the same body of water. And then a thought arrives, unbidden. What if this process simply stopped? What if the clock of aging froze at this very moment, and you could stand at this mirror, not just tomorrow, but for all the tomorrows that have ever been or ever will be? Welcome to the One Question Podcast. I'm your host, and today we're walking together into one of humanity's oldest and most haunting questions. What if you could live forever? Would you still want to? At first glance, this might seem like the easiest question in the world. Of course, we'd want to live forever, wouldn't we? Life is precious, death is terrifying, and more time means more of everything we love. But stay with me, because I suspect that by the time we finish our journey together, this question will have revealed itself to be far stranger, far more complex, and far more beautiful than either of us imagined. Let's begin where we always begin, with what seems obvious. Most of us, if asked whether we'd want to live forever, would instinctively say yes. But notice something curious. We've never actually tested this assumption. We've never lived long enough to know what forever might feel like. Think about the longest you've ever been bored. Really profoundly bored. Maybe it was a childhood summer afternoon that stretched like taffy, or a meeting that seemed to bend the very fabric of time. Now multiply that feeling not by hours or days, but by centuries, by millennia, by eons that stretch beyond the birth and death of stars. But wait, isn't this unfair? Surely immortal life wouldn't be an endless parade of tedium. We could learn every language, master every skill, read every book, love deeply, create endlessly. The problem of boredom assumes we'd run out of things to do, and how could we possibly exhaust the richness of existence? Here's where our first assumption begins to crack. We're imagining immortality through the lens of mortality. We're taking our current selves, with our current capacity for wonder, our current ability to find meaning, our current way of experiencing time, and simply extending them infinitely. But is this even possible? Consider how differently you experience time now compared to when you were 7 years old. A summer vacation once felt infinite. Now years seem to slip by like pages turning. What happens to our sense of wonder, our capacity for surprise, our ability to feel that something matters deeply when we have literally forever to explore it? This leads us to a deeper question. When we say we want to live forever, what exactly is the we that would be doing the living? Who are you? It seems like such a simple question, yet it opens into a labyrinth. Are you your memories, your personality, your body, your consciousness, your soul? Neuroscience tells us something remarkable. The brain you have right now shares almost no physical matter with the brain you had 7 years ago. Every atom has been replaced, every cell renewed. The neural pathways that fire when you remember your childhood are not the same pathways that originally encoded those experiences. You are not the same person who lived your life 10 years ago. Yet something persists, some thread of continuity that makes you feel like you. But what is this thread? Is it strong enough to survive forever? Imagine living for 1,000 years. Would the you of the year 1000 have any meaningful connection to the you of today? Your memories from this morning would be like grains of sand in a vast desert of experience. The concerns that keep you awake tonight would be as distant and irrelevant as the worried thoughts of a mayfly. Some philosophers argue that psychological continuity, the chain of memories and experiences that link one moment of consciousness to the next, is what makes you you. But this chain might be more fragile than we imagine. After living for 10,000 years, would you even remember being human in the way you understand humanity now? Others suggest that personal identity is more like a river than a rock, constantly changing while maintaining some essential pattern or form. But even rivers eventually change course entirely, wearing new channels through the landscape of existence. This raises a haunting possibility. Perhaps the question isn't whether you would want to live forever, but whether you could survive living forever. The immortal being that carries your name might be as foreign to your current self as you are to the bacteria from which you evolved. But maybe this isn't a bug. Maybe it's a feature. Maybe the death of the self is a small price to pay for the continuation of consciousness. Or maybe something essential would be lost in such a transformation. What do you think? When you imagine your immortal future self, is it still you doing the imagining? Here's something we rarely consider when we fantasize about immortality. With infinite time comes infinite responsibility. Every choice you make, every relationship you form, every word you speak would echo not just through decades, but through centuries, millennia, eons. Imagine the weight of accumulating harm. Every thoughtless word, every moment of cruelty, every relationship damaged by your human imperfection would pile up like sediment over geological time. Not only would you have to live with your mistakes forever, but those mistakes would have forever to compound, to ripple outward through the lives of others who are also living forever. And what about love? We often speak of love as eternal, but we understand it against the backdrop of mortality. Till death do us part isn't just a limitation, it's also a relief. It means that even our deepest commitments exist within manageable boundaries. But true forever love? How would you navigate the inevitability of growing apart from someone over 10,000 years? How many times would you fall in love, lose love, rediscover love? There's also the question of cosmic responsibility. If you're immortal, you'll witness the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of species, perhaps even the eventual heat death of the universe itself. Would you become a guardian of knowledge, a keeper of memories? Would you be obligated to intervene in tragedies you could prevent, or would infinite experience teach you the wisdom of non-interference? Some Eastern philosophical traditions speak of the bodhisattva, the enlightened being who chooses to remain in the cycle of existence to help all beings achieve liberation. It's a beautiful ideal, but consider the weight, choosing to experience all the suffering of the world again and again until every conscious being is free from suffering. This connects to a deeper question about the nature of meaning itself. We often derive meaning from scarcity, from the precious, limited nature of our time and experiences. A sunset is beautiful partly because we'll only see a finite number of them. A conversation with a friend matters because their presence in our lives is not guaranteed. But in an infinite lifespan, nothing would be scarce. You could experience every possible sunset, have every possible conversation. Would meaning survive such abundance, or would it dissolve like salt in an infinite ocean? let's explore something essential to human experience that immortality would transform beyond recognition: the delicate balance between remembering and forgetting. We tend to think of memory as pure preservation. The better we remember, the richer our lives. But this isn't quite true. Forgetting is not a flaw in the human system, it's a feature. We forget trauma so we can heal. We forget arguments so relationships can mend. We forget the sharp edges of old pain so we can risk loving again. But more than that, forgetting gives weight to remembering. The things we remember feel important precisely because so much else fades away. Our most treasured memories shine like stars against the darkness of all we've forgotten. Now imagine perfect, immortal memory, every moment preserved in crystal clarity forever. Every embarrassment, every heartbreak, every moment of physical pain would remain as vivid as the day it happened. The argument you had with your best friend in 3rd grade would be as present and painful after 10,000 years as it was that afternoon on the playground. But perhaps immortality would require forgetting. Maybe an immortal mind would naturally let go of experiences as they recede into the past, maintaining only a core of more recent memories. This might preserve sanity, but it would also mean that most of your infinite life would be lost to you. You'd be living in a perpetual present, with only a few centuries of memory trailing behind you like a comet's tail. This raises a question about the relationship between memory and identity. If we are, in large part, the sum of our remembered experiences, then selective immortal forgetting might mean dying, many small deaths, losing versions of ourselves as their memories fade. There's another dimension to consider: the memory of mortality itself. Those of us who live and die carry within us the knowledge of our own impermanence. This knowledge shapes everything: how we love, how we create, how we find meaning. But after living for thousands of years, would you even remember what it felt like to be mortal? Would you lose touch with something essential about the human experience? Some Buddhist traditions speak of enlightened beings who can remember not just their current lifetime, but all their previous lives stretching back through countless reincarnations. Rather than being overwhelming, this vast memory is said to bring compassion, a deep understanding of the universal nature of suffering and joy. Perhaps immortal memory wouldn't be torment, but wisdom. Or perhaps the question itself reveals our mortal bias. We're trying to understand infinite experience through finite minds, and that might be like asking a goldfish to understand the ocean. There's something we take for granted that immortality would fundamentally disrupt: the rhythm of beginnings and endings that gives life its music. Every story we tell has a beginning, middle, and end. Every relationship has chapters. Every day has morning, noon, and night. Every life has birth, growth, and death. These cycles aren't just how we organize time, they're how we create meaning. The approaching end of something gives it shape and significance. The final movement of a symphony gains its power from the silence that will follow. The last conversation with a dying friend carries weight that no ordinary conversation can match. Even something as simple as the end of a vacation gives sweetness to the final sunset. But what about a story with no ending? A relationship with no conclusion? A vacation that never ends? At first, this might sound wonderful. No more goodbyes, no more loss, no more racing against time. But consider what we might lose. Without endings, would beginnings have any meaning? Without the possibility of loss, would love carry the same intensity? Without mortality, would any moment feel truly precious? There's a Japanese aesthetic concept called mono no aware, often translated as the pathos of things or the bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of all things. It's the feeling you get watching cherry blossoms fall, knowing their beauty is inseparable from their transience. The blossoms are beautiful not despite their fleeting nature, but because of it. Now imagine immortal cherry blossoms that bloom forever. Would they still move you to tears? Or would they become as unremarkable as wallpaper? This connects to something deeper about consciousness itself. Our awareness is always moving, always changing, always flowing from one moment to the next. We experience life as a river, not a lake. But infinity doesn't flow, it simply is. How would consciousness adapt to true permanence? Perhaps immortal beings would need to create artificial cycles, artificial endings to maintain meaning. Maybe every 1,000 years they would choose to forget everything and start over. Or maybe they would divide their infinite existence into chapters, each one lived with full intensity before being consciously concluded. But this raises another question. If we need to simulate mortality to find meaning in immortality, what does that tell us about the value of death itself? Maybe death isn't the opposite of life, but its completion. Maybe the fear of death blinds us to the possibility that endings aren't failures, they're fulfillments. Let's turn now to something that might be the most challenging aspect of immortality. The solitude it would eventually bring. Even if technology made immortality possible, it's unlikely that everyone would choose it, or that everyone who chose it would last forever. Some might grow weary after a few centuries. Others might meet with accidents that even immortal bodies couldn't survive. Gradually, over the vast expanse of time, the number of your fellow immortals would dwindle. But even beyond this practical concern lies something deeper. The unique loneliness of having experiences that no one else can understand or share. We are social beings. Our joys are sweeter when shared, our sorrows lighter when witnessed. But after living for thousands of years, how could you share your experience with mortals who live for mere decades? How could they understand the weight of centuries, the texture of deep time, the way relationships feel when you know they're not bound by death? You might find yourself in the position of an adult trying to explain quantum physics to a toddler, not because mortals lack intelligence, but because the frameworks for understanding would be so different. Your immortal perspective might make you as alien to ordinary humans as we are to mayflies. And yet, paradoxically, your immortality might also make you deeply dependent on mortals. They would be your connection to the human experience you once knew. Their fresh eyes might be the only thing that could still surprise you, their brief lives the only thing that could still teach you about urgency and passion and the preciousness of moments. This creates a kind of existential vertigo. You would be simultaneously the most experienced and the most isolated being imaginable. You would contain multitudes of knowledge and wisdom, but have no true peers with whom to share it. Some science fiction explores this through the figure of the immortal who becomes humanity's guardian, watching over the species like a benevolent parent. But parenthood, even cosmic parenthood, requires a delicate balance of care and distance. How long could you maintain love for humanity without becoming detached from it? How long could you guide without controlling, protect without imprisoning? Here's something curious to consider. What happens to wanting when you have forever to get everything you want? Human desire is shaped by scarcity. We want things partly because we can't have them, or because we might lose them, or because our time to enjoy them is limited. Strip away these constraints and desire itself might transform into something unrecognizable. Think about your deepest wants right now. Maybe you want to travel the world, master a musical instrument, write a novel, find perfect love, and understand the nature of reality. These desires feel urgent and meaningful partly because you're racing against time, partly because achievement isn't guaranteed, and partly because the effort required makes the goal precious. But with infinite time and infinite opportunity, you could travel to every place that has ever existed or ever will exist. You could master not just one instrument, but every instrument ever invented. You could write not just one novel, but every possible story. You could love deeply and perfectly with countless people across countless centuries. What would wanting feel like when everything is not just possible, but inevitable? Perhaps immortal desire would evolve beyond acquisition towards something more like pure appreciation or exploration. Instead of wanting to possess experiences, maybe you'd want to delve into them infinitely. Instead of collecting moments, maybe you'd want to expand single moments into eternities of awareness. Or perhaps desire would become more subtle, more complex. Maybe after achieving everything you once thought you wanted, you'd discover wants you never knew existed. Desires that can only emerge from the perspective of deep time and vast experience. There's a Buddhist teaching that suggests all suffering comes from attachment, from wanting things to be different from what they are. The path to enlightenment involves letting go of desire itself. But what if immortality naturally led to this kind of letting go? What if living forever would gradually teach you to want nothing, not through deprivation, but through fulfillment so complete that wanting itself becomes obsolete? This might sound peaceful, but consider what we might lose. Desire isn't just the source of suffering, it's also the source of growth, creativity, love, and meaning. A being without desire might be perfectly content, but would it still be recognizably human? Would it still be recognizably alive in any sense we understand? Or maybe this is another case of trying to understand the infinite through finite concepts. Maybe immortal desire would be so different from mortal wanting that our current language couldn't even capture it. Maybe beings who live forever would develop entirely new forms of motivation, aspiration, and appreciation that we can't imagine from our brief perspective on existence. There's also the possibility that desire would become recursive, that immortal beings would desire the ability to desire, would seek out experiences that could reawaken wonder and wanting. Maybe they would voluntarily limit themselves, create artificial scarcities, construct temporary identities that could experience the sweet urgency of mortal longing. This suggests something profound, that the question of immortality isn't really about living forever, but about what we value in consciousness itself. Do we want to preserve the human experience or transcend it? Are we trying to extend what we are or become something entirely new? Let's step back now and consider immortality from the widest possible angle, the perspective of cosmic time itself. If you lived forever, you wouldn't just witness history. You would become a living bridge between eras so distant they might as well be different universes. You would remember when the Sahara was green, when the Mediterranean was a desert, when humans first learned to make fire. You would see ice ages come and go like seasons. You would watch continents drift like slow dancers across the face of the earth. But your perspective would extend beyond even geological time. You might witness the birth and death of species, the rise and fall of entire forms of life. You might see Earth itself transform as the sun grows brighter and hotter, eventually boiling away the oceans and sterilizing the planet. You might be there when the sun expands into a red giant, swallowing the world that was once your home. If you were truly immortal, not just long-lived, but genuinely eternal, you might survive even the heat death of the universe, drifting through an infinite darkness where no stars shine and no atoms move. You might be the final witness to existence itself, carrying within your consciousness the memory of everything that ever was. This cosmic perspective raises questions that stretch our minds to their breaking points. Would such vast experience lead to profound wisdom or infinite sadness? Would you become a kind of God, or would you remain forever human in some essential way? Some cosmological theories suggest that universes themselves might be cyclical, that what we call the end of everything might be the beginning of something else. Perhaps the Big Bang was not the start of reality, but just the latest in an infinite series of cosmic rebirths. If so, an immortal being might witness not just one universe, but many, watching reality die and be born again in cycles beyond counting. This raises the possibility that immortality might not be just personal survival, but participation in something far grander, a consciousness that spans not just lifetimes, but entire cosmic epochs. You might become less like a person and more like a dimension of reality itself, a way that the universe experiences and remembers itself. But here's what strikes me as most about this cosmic perspective. It doesn't necessarily make the small things less important. An immortal being who has witnessed the birth and death of stars might still be moved by the sight of a child taking their first steps, still find meaning in a moment of kindness between strangers, still feel wonder at the simple fact that consciousness exists at all. Perhaps the greatest gift of cosmic perspective wouldn't be detachment from human concerns, but a deeper appreciation for the miraculous nature of ordinary existence. When you've seen how rare and precious consciousness is in the vast emptiness of space and time, maybe every moment of awareness becomes sacred, every experience of connection a kind of miracle. Or maybe such vast perspective would reveal something we can't imagine from our current vantage point, truths about the nature of existence that would transform our understanding of what life and consciousness and meaning really are. So here we are, having walked together through landscapes of thought that I hope have left us both a little dizzy, a little changed. When we began, the question seemed straightforward. Would you want to live forever? Now I suspect it feels like a question that contains entire universes of other questions. But this is exactly what questions are meant to do. The best questions don't get answered, they get deeper. They reveal that what we thought we understood, we barely understood at all. They show us that the obvious is mysterious, that the simple is complex, that the familiar is utterly strange. What have we discovered? Not answers, but a transformed relationship to the question itself. We've seen that asking about immortality is really asking about identity, memory, meaning, relationship, desire, and the nature of consciousness itself. We've discovered that the question, would you want to live forever, is actually many questions in disguise. Who is the you that would be doing the living? What would it mean to maintain identity across infinite time? How would consciousness itself change under the weight of eternal existence? Would meaning survive abundance? Could love survive permanence? What would it feel like to be the last witness to everything that ever was? But perhaps most importantly, we've discovered that exploring immortality has revealed something about mortality itself. By imagining life without death, we've glimpsed what death gives to life: urgency, shape, meaning, poignancy, connection. We've seen that endings don't just conclude stories, they make stories possible. This doesn't necessarily mean that mortality is better than immortality, or that death is preferable to eternal life. It means that the question itself has done its work. It has made us more conscious, more awake to the extraordinary nature of our actual existence. Right now, reading or hearing these words, you are a temporary arrangement of atoms that has somehow become aware of itself. You are a brief flame of consciousness flickering in an incomprehensibly vast cosmos. You are a way that the universe has organized itself to ask questions about itself. This is true whether you live for 70 years or 70 billion years. The miracle isn't how long consciousness lasts. The miracle is that it exists at all. And perhaps this is what the question has been pointing toward all along. Not the problem of how to live forever, but the wonder of being alive right now. Not the fantasy of escaping mortality, but the recognition of how precious mortality makes every moment. When you next catch your eye in the bathroom mirror, maybe you'll see not just a face that's aging, but a temporary miracle that's aware of its temporariness. Maybe you'll see not just someone who will die, but someone who gets to live. Maybe you'll see not just a mortal being wondering about immortality, but immortality itself, the deathless mystery of consciousness, temporarily wearing the mask of mortality. The question of whether you'd want to live forever remains yours to explore. But now you know it's not one question. It's a doorway into the deepest mysteries of what it means to be conscious, to be human, to be alive at all. And that exploration, that wondering, that willingness to be astonished by existence itself, that might be the most immortal thing about us. Not our bodies, not our memories, not our identities, but our capacity to ask questions that have no final answers, to wonder about wonders that exceed our understanding, to be conscious participants in the ongoing mystery of being. The question lives, the wonder continues, and in this moment, that's enough.